Hey, 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 you know what time it is.
Woo! Get into it! Get into it! Yes!
We're back! We're back with Storytime with Chris. And also, today, fun fact, is the 100th anniversary of Walt Disney. So, Walt Disney as a company started in 1923 with Walt Disney and his brother Roy Disney, who ironically are from Indiana. Fun fact. They were able to scramble up a bunch of money doing some side jobs and getting into college for art school and animation school, moved out to California, and they were able to build up an animation studio with Alice Classics, if I'm not mistaken, and then they were able to build their own brand with their first character, who later got bought out, if I'm not mistaken, by Warner Brothers, which was Oswald the Rabbit, which, as of this recording, a few years ago, he's back in the rights and control of Walt Disney as a company. The first company to ever make the first feature-length animated film in the world, which was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Disney is an amazing company. They have not always been correct with certain moves and decisions or depictions of people, but as the decades have gone on, they have since gotten a lot better with representation, with accuracy, with magic, fantasy, imagination. It's a whole thing. And having been to Disney World at least once, it is truly the most magical place in the world, and it's so much fun. And I will have to say, like, I was just talking about it with a friend earlier, like, a part of me is Disney films, animated and live action films have shaped my life. And then there's this other category where Don Bluth, if you don't know who that is, you need to really think about it. But Don Bluth is another half of that equation. And then in a tiny, tiny corner right here is animation as a whole. So that includes B-rated animated movies, anime, everything that isn't a major conglomerate, which anime is $1 billion franchise, don't get me wrong. But when I talk about my childhood, I didn't get into anime until I was about maybe like 6 or 7. And I love both, and you can love both. I love Disney, I love DreamWorks, Pixar, Warner Brothers, Fox, well, now known as 20th Century Studios, Leica Studios, for those who've seen The Box Trolls and Monster House, which is a great Halloween movie. Um, yeah, the list goes on. I love animation. I love the magic of what animation does, and it was because of Disney's advances in technology when it came to animation that they were able to do so many cool things. Did you know, back in the day, and they kind of still do this technique now, they don't do rotoscoping anymore, which is a whole nother conversation today. Teachers, parents, you could do a whole discussion piece on the technicality of rotoscoping and how that works. But Disney, before they would fully animate a movie, they would have live actors portray these characters, and they would animate as they moved. Like, they would screen it first, like film them, and then the artist would come in and trace in and draw and really define the character movement based off of the live actors that were there as models for them to draw. So that is a really cool thing. And then Disney was one of the first few companies that utilized CGI within an animated movie, specifically with Aladdin, with the character of the Cave of Wonders, the tiger head. So that was a completely computer generated image, as well as the magic carpet is one of the first CGI characters in the film. So yeah, cool stuff. Correct me in the comments below if I'm wrong. But I say all that to say, happy 100th birthday, Walt Disney. I love you as a company. I love what you are bringing to the table and the many, many progressive choices that you've made. Not all of them correct, but for the ones that count and matter and really resonate in people's hearts, I have a lot of love and respect for that. And sky is the limit. But you didn't come to hear me blather. We are here to hear a story. So, let me get a sip of my tea and then we'll get started. And of course, I don't own the music that you're listening to in the background, which is brought to you yet again by Mr. Ambiance. Please like and share and subscribe to their channel. Like and share, subscribe to Storytime. The link is within my bio as well as on my bio on Instagram, okay? If you want to hear a highly animated voice bring you wonderful stories of magic, adventure, science fiction, and many, many more in between. All right. Ooh. There's some hot tea on this cold October day, which I love. So we're back, and Taran and Gurgi have decided to stay with Taran's biological father, Craddock, to try to help him rebuild the farm. And Taran is in a bit of a sticky situation because he's happy that he got to meet who his biological father is. But deep down, he's actually disappointed in finding out who his father is because he was hoping that he would be of noble lineage, which would make him, in his mind, more profitable to be an eligible fiance to Ilanwe if he were to propose to her. So now that he finds out that his dad is a farmer who, unfortunately, because of his pride, did not allow his wife to leave the farm or to move away because they were in such a desolate area because of his own pride of wanting to keep his own land. His mom passed away, didn't even get to meet his mom, and then when Taran was a little child, he got sick, and the dad didn't want to leave to go and get help. But then Dalbin happened to be passing by, and he was like, hey, I can heal your kid. And so Craddock tells Dalbin, he said, take my child and heal him and then bring him back home to me. And that ended up going on for 15 years, having not seen his son. And he just happened upon this man he's got a crutch, so he's got to support himself because he's not able to walk because he's been injured. But he was helped just passing by, and then lo and behold, he tells the story to Taran, and Taran puts the dots together. He's like, oh my goodness, you're my dad. So it's an awkward yet uplifting yet bittersweet moment that people in life do have when they meet their biological parents or people in their lives that they're connected to by family. So it's a bit of an adjustment, and people have to be patient with that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. Chapter 15, The Open Cage. Throughout summer and fall, the three had worked unstingingly to finish the cottage, their only refuge against the oncoming winter. Now, as the first snow whirled from the heavy sky to powder the crags with dry white flakes, it was done. The walls of new stone rose firm and solid. The roof had been thatched anew and tightly chinked against wind and weather. Within a fire cheerily blazed in the new hearth. The wooden benches had been mended. The door no longer sagged on broken hinges. Though Craddock had given himself unsparingly to the toil, the cottage for the most part was Taran's labor. The rusted tools, sharpened and refurbished, served him to make what other tools he needed. The planning as well as the doing had been his, and as he stood in the doorway, the fine snow clinging like chaff to his uncropped hair, it was not without pride that he watched the smoke rising from the rebuilt chimney. Craddock had come to stand beside him, and the herdsman put a hand fondly on Taran's shoulder. For a time neither spoke, but at last Craddock said, for all the years I strove to keep what was mine, it is mine no longer. His bearded face furrowed in a smile. Ours, he said. Taran nodded, but made no further answer. Soon, since the winter tasks were shortened, the brief days seemed longer. Evenings by the fire to while away the time, Craddock told of his youth, of his settling in the valley. As the herdsman spoke of his hopes and hardships, Taran's admiration quickened, and for the first time he saw Craddock as a man who had been not unlike himself. Thus, at Craddock's urging, Taran was willing to tell of his days at Caer Dallben and all that had befallen him. Craddock's face brightened with fatherly pride as he heard of these adventures. Yet often Taran would stop in the midst of his recounting when memories of Ilanwe and all his life long past would surge suddenly and break upon him like a wave. Then would he break off abruptly, turn his face away, and stare at the fire. Those times Craddock pressed him to speak no more. A bond of affection, born of their common toil, had grown among all three. Craddock never failed to treat Gurgi with much kindness and gentleness, and the creature, more than ever pleased with his duties as shepherd, was well content. But once, at the beginning of winter, Craddock spoke apart with Taran, saying, since the day you came to dwell here, I have called you my son. Yet never have you called me father. Taran bit his lip. At one time he had yearned to shout aloud his bitterness, to fling it angrily in the herdsman's face. It still tormented him, but now he could not bring himself to wound the feelings of one he scorned as a father yet honored as a man. Seeing Taran's distress, Craddock nodded briefly. "Perhaps," he said, "perhaps one day you shall." Snow turned the gray summits glistening white, yet the tall peaks Taran once had seen as bars now shielded the valley from the brunt of the storms, and against the wolf wind howling through the ice-bound passes, the cottage stood fast. Late of an afternoon, when Craddock and Gergie had gone to see to the flock, the gale sharpened and Taran set about stretching a heavier sheepskin across the narrow window. He had only begun when the door was flung open as though ripped from its hinges. Shouting frantically, Gergie burst into the cottage.
Help! 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 Kindly, master, come with hastings!
Gergie's face was pale as ashes. His hands shook violently as he clutched at Taran's arm.
Master, master, follow Gergie quickly! Oh, quickly!
Taran dropped the sheepskin, hurriedly donned a fleece jacket, and as Gergie moaned and wrung his hands, snatched up a cloak and raced through the open door. Outside, the wind caught at him and nearly flung him backward. Gergie pressed on, wildly waving his arms. Taran bent forward against the gale and ran beside his desperate companion, stumbling across the snow-swept field. At the edge of the pasture they had cleared during the summer, the land fell sharply away into stony slopes, and he followed close behind Gergie as the creature scrambled past a rocky draw, then along a twisting path where he soon halted. Taran gasped in dismay as Gergie, whimpering fearfully, pointed downward. A narrow ledge jutted from the sheer side of the gorge. A figure, arms outflung, lay motionless, one leg twisted under his body, partly covered with fallen stones. It was Craddock.
Gone with stumblings, Gergie moaned. Oh, miserable Gergie could not save him from slippings.
He clapped his hands to his head.
Too late for helpings.
Taran's head spun with shock. Grief struck him like a sword, but then, beyond his will, terrifying in his sudden onrush, a wild sense of freedom flooded him as though rising from the most hidden depths of his heart. In one dizzying glance he seemed to see his cage of stone crumble. The still form on the ledge stirred painfully and lifted an arm. "He lives!" Taran cried.
"Oh, master, how do we save him?" Gergie wailed. "Terrible crags are steep. Even bold Gergie fears to climb down."
"Is there no other way?" Taran exclaimed. "He's badly hurt, dying perhaps. We cannot leave him." He pressed his fist to his reeling forehead. "Even if we could make our way to him, how should we bear him up? If we fail, not one life lost, but 3. His hands were shaking. It was not despair that filled him, but terror, black terror, at the thoughts whispering in his mind. Was there the slimmest hope of saving the stricken herdsman? If not, even Prince Gwydion would not reproach Taran's decision, nor would any man. Instead, they would grieve with him at his loss, free of his burden, free of the valley. The door of his cage opened wide, and all of his life awaited him. Eilonwy, Caerdalban. He seemed to hear his own voice speak these words, and he listened in shame and horror. Then, as if his heart would burst with it, he cried out in a terrible rage, "What man am I?" Blind with fury at himself, he sprang down the slope and clawed for a handhold amid the ice-covered stones, while Gergie, panting fearfully, clambered after him. Taran's numbed fingers clutched vainly at an outcropping as a rock gave way beneath his feet. Downward he pitched, and cried out as a jagged stone drove against his chest. Black suns burst in his head, and he choked with pain. Above, Gergie was sliding down in a shower of ice and pebbles. Taran's heart pounded. He was on the ledge. Craddock lay within arm's reach. Taran crawled to his side. Blood streamed down Craddock's brow as the herdsman struggled to raise his head. Son, he gasped. "You have lost your life for me." "Not so," Taran answered. "Don't try to move. We'll find a way to bring you to safety." He raised himself to his knees. Craddock was even more grievously hurt than Taran had feared. Carefully, he lifted away the heavy stones and shale that pressed against the herdsman, and gently drew him closer to the protecting face of the cliff. Gergie had dropped to the ledge and scurried to Taran. "Master! Master!" he cried. "Gergie sees a pathway upward, but it is steep, oh, steep with dangers of hurtful stumblings and tumblings." Taran glanced at where the creature pointed. Amid the rocks and snow-filled crevices he could make out a narrow passageway free of ice. Yet as Gurgi had warned, it rose nearly straight up. One man at a time could scale it, but what of two, burdened with a third? He gritted his teeth. The sharp stone had wounded him sorely as a blade, and each breath he drew filled his lungs with fire. He gestured for Gurgi to lay hold of Craddock's legs, while he edged unsteadily along the sheer drop and slid his hands under the herdsman's shoulders. As gently as the companions strove to lift him, Craddock cried out in agony, and they were forced to halt, fearful their efforts would do much further harm. A wind had risen, screaming through the valley, lashing at the companions and nearly tearing them from the ledge. Once more they struggled to bear Craddock to the upward passage, and once more fell back as the gale battered them. The early twilight had begun deepening, and shadows filled the gorge. The face of the cliff wavered before Taran's eyes. His legs trembled as he forced himself again to lift the herdsman. "Leave me," Craddock murmured hoarsely. "Leave me. You waste your own strength." "Leave you?" Taran burst out. "What son forsakes his own flesh and blood?" Hearing this, Craddock smiled for an instant. Then his face grew taut in anguish. "Save yourselves," he whispered. "You are my father," Taran replied. "I stay." "No!" the herdsman cried out with all his strength. "Do as I ask and go from here. Heed me now, or it will be too late. The duty of kinship you owe me none. No bond of blood holds you." "How then?" Taran gasped, staring wildly at the herdsman. His head spun and he clutched at the ledge. "How then? Do you tell me I am not your son?" Craddock looked at him a moment, his eyes unwavering. "Never have I been false to any man, save once to you." "A lie?" Taran stammered for a moment. Did you lie to me then? Or do you lie to me now?" "Half-truth is worse than lie," Craddock answered brokenly. "Hear me. Hear this part of the truth. Yes, long past, as he journeyed through Prydain, Dalbin sheltered with me, but of what he sought he never spoke." "The child," Taran cried. "There was none?" "There was," Craddock answered. "A son, our firstborn. Even as I told you, he did not live beyond the day of his birth. His mother died with him," he murmured. "And you, I needed your strength to keep what remained to me. I saw no other way. Even as I spoke the lie, I was ashamed, the more ashamed to speak the truth. When your companion left, I could only hope that you would follow with him and gave you freedom so to do. You chose to stay. But this as well is true," Craddock said hurriedly. "At first I leaned upon you, as on my own crutch, because you served my need, but no father came to love a son more dearly." Taran's head sank to his breast. He could not speak. His tears blinded him. Craddock, who had half raised himself, fell back to the stones on the ledge. "Go from here. Go from here," he murmured. Taran's hand dropped to his side. His fingers touched the rim of the battle horn. With a sudden cry, he straightened up. Eilonwy's horn, unthinking, he had slung it about his shoulder when he had run from the cottage. Hastily, he drew it from beneath his coat. The summons to the fair folk, the call he had treasured, it alone could save Craddock. He stumbled to his feet. The ledge seemed to sway beneath him. The notes Dolly had taught him blurred in his mind, and he strove desperately to recall them. Suddenly they rang once more in his mind. He raised the horn to his lips. The notes sprang loud and clear, and even before the signal faded, the wind caught them and seemed to fling the call through all the valley, where it returned in echo after echo. Then whirling shadows engulfed him, and Taran dropped to the ledge. To my Legend of Zelda fans, you know what that is. If you know, you know. And no, I haven't played Tears of the Kingdom, so no spoilers. How long they clung there, he did not know. Whether moments or hours, he was only dimly aware of strong hands bearing him up of a rope lashed around his waist. He glimpsed vaguely as between the flickering of a dark flame, the broad faces of dwarfish mountaineers whose number he could not judge. When next he opened his eyes, he was in the cottage, the fire blazing, Gurgi beside him. Taran started up. Pain seared his chest, which he saw had been carefully bandaged. "The signal," he murmured feebly. "It was answered."
Yes, yes, Gurgi cried. Fair folk save us with mighty haulings and heavings. They bind up kindly masters' hurtful wounds and leave healing herbs for all that is needful.
"The summons," Taran began. "Good old Dolly. He warned me not to waste it. For Craddock's sake, I'm glad I kept it as long as I did. Craddock, where is he? How does he fare?" He stopped suddenly. Gurgi was looking at him silently. The creature's face wrinkled miserably, and tears stood in his eyes as he bowed his shaggy head. Taran fell back. His own cry of anguish rang in his ears. Beyond that was only darkness. And that is where we will stop for today. Definitely makes me think about... Oh, I always do that because it's a force of habit when I adjust my glasses. It makes me think about the turn of phrase, "You never know what you have till you lost it." But it does beg the question, this mystery with Craddock. If he is Taran's true father, what was he hiding and why did he lie? Or not tell the whole truth? Told you, it's a very nuanced, difficult situation. There are plenty of youth and people, even adults, who meet their biological family or their parents or their siblings, and they may have shame in some way for them for whatever reason, and then something like this happens, and it's too late. Never take this time for granted, children. Cherish these moments with people. Not just people you know, but people who are kind to you, genuine, sweet, loyal, trustworthy, compassionate. Spread that out to somebody else who needs it, because you never know what other people are going through. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.